Okay, we're going to kind of move gears just a little bit, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Perkins Program Effectiveness Report. And a couple of things. First off, I want you to kind of get this chronologically in your mind. As you're thinking about the grants and the grant reporting, one thing you're going to find is that there's really only one program report that we are requiring, only one evaluation report, if you will, that we're requiring on your grant, and that is the Perkins Program Evaluation Report. That report is due after the ending of the grants. And so really you've got a couple of things going on simultaneously that deal with grants. Right now you're in the process. You've already heard that we've talked about the grants are currently open. The e-grant system is open. You can work on your 2016-17 Perkins grant. At the same time that that's going on, you will also need to be working on your program effectiveness report. But what you're reporting on is the 2015-16 grant. So don't let that confuse you. You're working with two different years at the same time. The report deals with the previous year. The application deals with the coming year. So if you put that in a chronological line, what you would really want to do is put in that application the things that you are planning to do during the year, how you're planning to spend that money, what your program is going to look like. Dale did a good job earlier of kind of showing you some of the things that need to go into that grant application and trying to design that program. And then at the end of the year, you're going to report back to us, this is what we did and this is how we did it. So as we look at this, I'm going to talk about the Program Effectiveness Report. And I've got several points that we're going to try to talk about in the next few minutes. And then if you've got questions, we'll be happy to entertain those. The other thing I was going to say is that you're going to notice some distinct similarities between the slides that I used and the ones that Dale used. I'm not sure exactly what the reason for that is, but I have a feeling I know, but we won't go there. But we are going to be giving you some of the same information, so there's some of this that I'm probably going to go through rather quickly because Dale went through it with you earlier, and we just probably don't need to cover it more than once, but if you've got questions, certainly stop and ask us. And so the first thing you're going to want to know is, how do I get access to the PER? And just like you do when you're doing the Perkins application, you're going to need a TEAS account in order to do that. And so how many of you do not have a TEAS account? Okay, if you need information on how to get a TEAS account, talk to one of us. We'll be happy to get you through that, but let's don't spend too much time on getting a TEAS account. Okay, and again, the role descriptions, Dale mentioned this earlier. As you're filling those out, somebody else mentioned this as well. Philip, I think, when that's you that mentioned the fact that it's not always the one at the top of the list, and it's not always the one that makes you sound the most important. There's some of these roles you might not really want to be that person. So, how will I know when the PER is open? Again, Dale went through this with you. This is the information that Shelley talked about a little bit this morning on the CTE listserv. I strongly suggest that you sign up for that CTE listserv if you have not done so already, and that's how we get that information out. You can usually count on that program effectiveness report being open sometime in May of each year. Just kind of varies from the exact date, varies just a little bit, but you can count on that being about when it opens. And one thing that you will learn real quickly, and this really isn't in my presentation anywhere, but David and some of you might back me up on what I'm going to say here. You need to kind of do some planning before school's out on this thing, because guess what? Some of the people who have the information you need to fill this out are your teachers. Guess how hard it is to find some of those teachers in the summertime? Kind of impossible. Okay, so where do I find the Program Effectiveness Report then? If you go to your grant page for your Perkins grant, and you look right down here at the bottom, it's going to have that program effectiveness report. It's going to show up right down there at the bottom. And when you click on that, it will open it up. Now, if you're in an SSA, it's going to look a little bit different. Do SSAs even have to fill out a program effectiveness report? You didn't do any of the financial piece.
Yes.
Why do you have to fill out a program effectiveness report? Just because you do. So, yeah, get used to it. That's just one of those things you have to do. You do have to fill out the program. Every district that takes Perkins money is required to fill out the program effectiveness report. Now, it's going to be a little bit different depending on if you're the physical agent or if you are an SSA member or if you are a what we call a standalone district. Is there an official name for that?
Call it individual applicant.
Individual applicant. We call them a standalone district. So if depending on which one of those your district is, your program effectiveness report may look a little different. But if you're an SSA member, this is the screen and this is how it's going to look and where you're going to find your program effectiveness report, because all that other stuff that was on the previous screen back here really doesn't apply to your district. Okay, and then when is the program effectiveness report due? Well, again, if you look at this screen, you'll find down here at the bottom it tells you that. This year, I believe that the program effectiveness report, and help me with this one, is due October the 1st.
That's right.
Yeah. So that for 15, 16?
Yeah. Yeah.
21.
October 1st is when this report is due. It has been due much earlier. It's been due August 31st. But since the grant is extended by 6 weeks, we are extending the time that you have to make the report. So you do have a little bit more time, and actually some of those teachers will be back before then. Maybe not all of them. Some of them you may not want back. That happens too. So what kind of information do I need in order to be able to do the program effectiveness report? Well, one of the things I would suggest you think about really early in doing this is to print you out a PDF of this thing. Get a copy of it in your hand to where you can look at it and see what it is you're filling out. And you can do that by hitting the printable version up here, and it will give you a screen that will enable you to be able to print out a copy of the program effectiveness report that you can hold in your hand, and you'll know what you're really dealing with. But here is the information that you need in order to fill out the program effectiveness report. Some of this you know. Probably know the district you work for. So, you're way ahead if you do. And some of this you're going to have a harder time knowing. Again, you're going to have to rely on some other people. It's probably those teachers who worked with those certifications and licensures. It's probably somebody in your business office who can help you with the expenditure report. It may be some other people in your district who worked with various other pieces of this. And so you need to know these are the things I need. And this makes a pretty good little checklist right here. And I'm sure that you'll have this slide presentation when this conference is finished. You'll have access to this. And this one slide right here might be helpful in filling out the program effectiveness report, because it pretty well summarizes the things that you may need. So maybe we should have started with this question, and that is, why should I even bother to submit the program effectiveness report? Well, this is kind of like half of David Letterman, I guess. These are the top 5 reasons for this. First, to reflect on the program effectiveness. And again, this is not the only tool to use for program evaluation. It is the only one that TEA requires that you use for program evaluation. But there are some other good tools, and I think maybe, Ann, you're going to touch on those in our next segment, aren't you? So I'm not going to spoil anything there, but there are some other good ways that maybe you can look at evaluating programs on various levels. And I would recommend that you do that, because all of those bring data to you that help you reflect on how effective you're being with the program that you're The number 4 reason is it helps you to predict the possibility of high-risk grantee designation. This means, is your district one of those that's going to be staged in some level of intervention? And that's something that you want to try to avoid. And certainly this is a way to help you understand if you're going down that path before it gets there. So use the data that you get to determine that. The number 3 reason, this one's pretty good. Perkins Program, the Perkins Act, the federal law that is Perkins, requires that we do program evaluation. That's a pretty good reason. When you submit the grant application, you have signed an agreement that you will submit a program evaluation. And when your superintendent, if he's the grantee official, and he certifies and submits that Perkins grant application, he has also agreed that you will do a program evaluation. So you want to be sure that you follow through with that. And then the number 1 reason, and this you don't want to get into, but it is possible that if you fail to submit this report, TEA could say, give us some money back because you did not comply with your grant. And I don't know too many cases where that's happened, but I'd hate to be the person that happened to. So that is a good reason. Let's talk about certifications and licensures. In the Program Effectiveness Report, parts 5 through 7 is where you record your CTE Code 2 and Code 3 students' license and certifications that they have earned. And I suspect this, I haven't been in here the whole time because I've been over in the counselor thing, so forgive me if I'm repeating things that have already been said, but I feel that this may have been already said about that this would be the last year for Code 3. Did that get discussed earlier? Okay. So this will be our last time to talk really about Code 3 students. But your Code 2 and Code 3 certifications and licensures earned, your concentrators, are recorded in parts 5 through 7 of the Program Effectiveness Report. The data that comes from that is used to use together to make up the technical skill obtainment core indicator, or what we call the 2S1 indicator. Now that's both an indicator at the local district level as well as an indicator at the state level. So all of that data, when compiled together statewide, makes up the core indicator that is 2S1. So in order for an exam, a license, or a certification to appear on the Program Effectiveness Report in Part 5, it must meet these next 3 criteria. It must be an end-of-program license or certification. It must be industry-recognized license or certification. And it must be available and appropriate for secondary students. So what does end-of-program mean? What does that mean? Well, end of program indicates that the students have reached the end of their program of study at the secondary level, remembering that a real true program of study transcends over into the post-secondary world too. But they have reached the end of that segment of their program. That means that it's probably more than just one class. It's certainly more than just a little piece of one class. And sometimes when we think about this, we think of these things that are really good certifications for our students to have. Maybe like an OSHA certification. Do we want kids to be safe with what they do? Absolutely. Safety is paramount in what we do. So we want kids to practice safety every day. Would we want them to have some type of certification that says that they have done a great job with that? Yeah, certainly we would. Is that the only thing we want them to learn in that CTE class? No. So does that make an end of program? So that that's a good example. to kind of think through as you're doing that. Industry recognized just tells us that is something that is really valued in industry. So if you're dealing with a license or certification, even if maybe if it's end of program, and even if it's appropriate for students, but it really doesn't have any value in industry, then it wouldn't be on that list either. We want to ensure that those things have some value to industry. And of course, appropriate and available for secondary students is pretty self-explanatory. Were the students who, what you're judging on this, incidentally, is were the students who took an exam well prepared to pass it. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. And I always use this example. If you have 10 kids take an exam, and 9 of them pass that exam, what percentage of your students have passed that exam? 90%. If you have 100 kids take an exam and 75 of them pass the exam, what percentage have passed? 75. Which percentage is higher than 90? Yeah. So even though you only had 10 students take an exam, your 2S1 rating is going to be better with that than it would be with 75 kids passing the exam. Is that clear? Is that understood? So it's about how well prepared the students were to pass the exam. Again, I'd refer to thinking through what is appropriate, and we actually have a document. Again, Ann, I think you're going to talk about this, aren't you? So again, I'm not going to steal Ann's thunder, but the myths and facts document that we have on our website does make a good resource to make some of these decisions. Okay, so what if I have an exam, and this is an end-of-program exam, it's recognized by industry, it's appropriate and available for secondary students, but it's not on your dead-gum per list. What am I going to do about it? Well, what you do about it is you tell us about it, because the only way that we're going to know, we're not out there looking at every exam. I don't know how we'd even do that. I don't know how we'd keep up with it if we didn't have your help. So the way that we do that is depend on you to report examinations like that, or licensures or certifications, on what we call the other lines. And what you're going to find in the Program Effectiveness Report are some lines that you can go in and add, and you can report other certifications and licensures. I will tell you that those exams, when you report them, do not figure into your 2S1 data. They are just there to inform TEA that there might be something we want to look at the next time we revise that list. And we may not revise that list every single year. It kind of depends on a lot of things that are going on. But you can bet that the next time we do, we're going to get all that information together, and we're going to spend a little bit of time examining each of those licenses and certifications to be sure that they meet that criteria. And if they do, then they are eligible to be added to the list. Keep in mind that whether or not a certification is on that list or not really does not determine whether that's a good certification or licensure for your students. But you can add up to 10 extra lines, and as you add a line, there's a way that you can, I'm not real sure how it works exactly, but I know that when you look at it, there's only one line there. When you add a certification, it will add you a new line, and it'll keep doing that until it gets up to 10. If you have more than 10, we'll wait till next year, I think, because call one of us and we'll try to figure out what to do next. It's really important that, a couple of things are important. There's no need to put data on that line. If you had 40 kids take the test and 39 of them pass it, we don't need to know that on that line, because again, that data does not reflect into your 2S1 data. All we need is the name of that exam, but what we need there is the official name of that exam. We need enough information that when John or Dale or Diane or I go to looking for that license or certification on the internet, we can find it. And we'll be able to determine who the vendor is and how to use that information. So that's very important. Provide enough information for the TEA staff to find the exam owner and the information that we need. So, what certifications and licensures should districts offer? Well, ask yourself these questions. Does it benefit my students? Is it reasonable for the district, for our program, and for our region of the state? And is it available and appropriate for secondary students? If you can answer those three questions in a positive way, then that's probably a license or certification that you need to be offering to your students. You should never use the question, is it on the PER, in order to determine whether that's a good license or certification for your students. Now, John, have you done your presentation yet? Or?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, John's going to talk to you a little bit about the relationship of the PER and the state reimbursement. And, I don't know if this has been said, but if you choose to use Perkins money to pay for licensures and certifications, the only ones that are actually eligible to be paid for are those that are on the Program Effectiveness Report, because what the rules say is that you've got to be reporting data to the state for technical skill obtainment purposes for the core indicator. So that's a true statement. John's going to talk to you a little bit later about the relationship of the PER to the state reimbursement program. But aside of all of that, I think you have to ask yourself, what's good for my kids? What is good for the students that are in the school district? And what should we do? Okay, I'm down to about one last thing here, and then we'll take some questions. One thing I wanted to point out to you is on parts 6 and 7, you're going to find this data field, and you're going to find that this line that says individuals with disabilities, it has ADA in parentheses, that line is grayed out on your application. And so no need to call us and say, hey, that line's grayed out. We know that. The reason it's grayed out is because that is a report that would be done. The ADA is done at the postsecondary level. The line that says disability status for ESSA or ESEA and TDEA, that next line down is where you would report students with disabilities at the secondary level. So it's just a difference in the way that information is handled. One of them is post-secondary, one of them is secondary. So on this report, that is grayed out. So I think, this is Dale's question slide. So
thank you for showing that.
Yeah, in fact, I'll go ahead and show the copyright that he didn't get to show earlier.
Now, how did these get?
I don't know, Dale.
Correct minds think alike.
Yeah, I guess we think alike. So, any questions about the program effectiveness report before I sit down? Yes, ma'am.
We've done a lot of work on certifications in our district and getting them to where they're tracked and that we're tracking the right ones. And I'm just curious, I come from a background of corporate. Do you have input from industry into what's going on the PER as what we're considering end of course certifications? I know sometimes we go talk to partners, they're like, that's not even relevant. So I'm kind of curious where that's coming from and if we're giving feedback as to how often it gets reviewed or looked at for effectiveness.
Yeah, and John, Dale, Diane helped me with this, but in my way of thinking, we are getting some feedback, but a lot of it is minimal in terms of how we're getting that information. Keeping in mind that a license or certification sometimes that's valued in one part of our state may not be in another part of the state. We're just dealing with a big animal here, so it's sometimes that's difficult. So sometimes we do our very best to give the benefit of the doubt where we're judging those things. Understand that the history of this PER report goes back to about 2007 or 8, and some of the decisions that were probably made earlier were made differently than they might be now. We probably didn't have as much guidance from the USDE as we do now on how some of these things should go. So, did that answer your question, more or less? Not really, but
Ron, sometimes we do get calls from industry saying, why is it on the PER? And when they're dealing with school districts, and we always tell them, well, you need to talk to the school district and let them know that they're going to buy that and it does meet the qualifications, to write that in, and then we'll review it around January, February.
okay, great point.
Get on the,
Thank you, John.
For the summer.
We are, Diane knows about this. She's been working with the Texas Workforce Investment Council, and Texas Workforce Commission, and some other folks from the governor's office at that level at TEA to get input about various licensures and certifications, because I think there is a feeling that we need to gather more information. So I don't think we're quite there yet, Diane. They're taking a couple of areas at a time, aren't they? Looking at 1,000 or so.
They're looking at 1,500 certifications that fall into STEM.
Yeah, STEM only
Middle
certification.
skill certifications.
Yeah. So to answer your point, I think we are, as a state, in collaboration with our partners at the Workforce Commission and the Texas Workforce Investment Council, trying to get a handle on this, because I think we realize kind of what your point is, that industry and business should have some input into what those are. More input.
Ann, did you have something to add?
I was just going to mention, even if something is on the PER and it isn't relevant to your situation or your community or your industry that you're working with, it's fine. You can move on to the things that are relevant and focus there and keep it all going.
Very good. Other questions? Well, thank you very much.